So today is a very special day. I'm so excited for this very, very important conversation with the amazing Allison Metcalfe of Demandbase. Thank you so much, Allison, for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Sheryl. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so before we jump in and start hearing about your gems of wisdom when it comes to generating revenue, especially during these disruptive times, can you tell me a little bit about what interests you? How did you get to where you were? Like, shine a little light on maybe what transpired with you, maybe even as a younger person, or and also too being a woman really in sales, in the highest level of sales. What inspired you to, keep going and be resilient and as persistent as you have been?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll tell you, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It certainly was not where I thought I would end up. I'm from the suburbs of Minneapolis, and my dad was an insurance agent. And growing up, I did some work for him in his small agency, and I dabbled in doing some other insurance things for him while I was in college, and failed really miserably at it. I was too young to be trying to talk about insurance. I had no credibility, but I really failed, and it was really embarrassing. And I really decided, in my early 20s that I was never going to be in sales or business of any kind. I wanted to be a journalist. That's what I wanted to do. And so then, kind of after college, I was traveling a lot, and I was teaching English as a second language. I lived in Japan for a while. I lived in Prague for a while, and I was back in the UK for a while teaching English at a magnet school there that attracted people from all over the world. And the woman who was the principal of this school, I was doing like a combination of teaching and some administrative work. This is, again, my early 20s. We kind of devised this plan because we were competitive with the other schools that what if we started going proactively, working with some of these agency partners in other parts of the world that send us students and try to build relationships with them and see if that might generate them to give us more business. And lo and behold, it did. And so when I decided to move to San Francisco in 2007, I was talking to her and I was like, what is the job that I put on my resume or look for that I am? What am I? And she was like, oh, I think you're an account manager. And so I was like, okay, I'll be an account manager. So I came out here, I got my first job, and I think what really happened was I was an account manager, but with very, very direct ties to revenue. I actually found that I was really good at sales when it was more organic and when it was something that I was interested in and could talk a little bit more eloquently about, and it was natural. I was good at it, and so I think that kind of combined with I have a natural kind of very strong action bias, I guess is the right word. When I see problems, I kind of have to fix them. And so just kind of having some good talent in sales and also being very solution oriented really helped me grow in my career over the years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, and also and I know that I shouldn't say no, but I would assume that it hasn't been easy, being in a male-dominated industry, which quite frankly is most industries, there've probably been, and most people who have ascended, to the level that you're at, it's kind of a circuitous path. So did you run into any road bumps along the way, and what mindset has allowed you to be successful or get to where you are today?
So, certainly, I think the biggest one that I ran into was the kind of classic, my behavior would be described as aggressive and the same behavior by a man would be described as assertive and in control or whatever. And I really struggled with being a bull in a china shop or whatever you want to insert expression. That was very challenging for me very early on in my career. And I think what I really learned the hard way, but it was the best advice I ever got, was to focus on the outcome you want to achieve and not necessarily in the way you want to react in that moment. And so what I mean by that is I would certainly be met with being dismissed or not being invited to the meeting or being talked over in the meeting or not being included in the strategy session. And when I was younger in my career, I might get angry. I might send that very unproductive email that is, calling someone out on that behavior. But what I found was more effective was when I really, again, a very parochial expression to kind of kill them with kindness, but it was like I would often do the thing that I didn't want to do the most to get to the outcome I wanted to achieve, especially with sales people who were men who really didn't want to bring me into their meetings. So that has been like my mantra when I've been in difficult situations, especially when my temper gets high or I get triggered, which we all do, right? I get triggered when I feel like someone's being condescending to me. In particular, I feel my blood pressure rise. But I've learned that it's never productive to react in the gut reaction way you want to. And often the most productive thing is to do the thing that is the most unnatural in that moment, which has been really kind of a key thing I coach people on all the time as well.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head, because there's something that now that we have a home gym in there, I tell my kids all the time, but it's when there's an arrow and it says emotions and there's an arrow with it going up, and then it says intelligence with an arrow going down. And so actually there's like actually something physiological that happens when you get very, very emotional, especially when it's negative. And so that's why it just does not end well. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's been a journey. It's been a journey, right? And I think it's what I kind of laugh about is my last boss at the company I was at before, when I had one of my first 360 reviews, he said, I think I mentioned something about, I know I need to work on my temperament and I can be emotional. And he was like, gosh, I just don't find you emotional at all, because I have really worked on it, and so it was really interesting. And I met him when I was like in my early 30s, and I had come a long way. And so my kind of joke is, when I moved to San Francisco, I really had to work on like some of my temperament and my handling of my emotions and suppressing my very strong Minnesotan accent at the same time. And now I'm this reasonable, regional less accent person you see before you.
Yeah, I didn't even know that there was a Minnesota accent. And I was also pleasantly surprised that we're basically neighbors here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And so let's just elaborate on that a little bit when we're talking about emotions. And one emotion is fear. And there's a lot of that around. And you were talking a couple things. You were talking about your company, that had an acquisition, not too long ago, new product coming out, a lot of expectations around the product, a lot of excitement around the product, of course. But how I'd like you to compare and the importance that you think with mindset of embracing that fear, looking it in the face, and really working with it rather than against it, and the importance of having everybody on board with a growth mindset, to be positive, to be optimistic, and really ready to be putting their best foot forward, rather than what I call like emotional contagions, who are just going to basically let fear take them over, because that's where negativity typically starts. And, what is the importance of taking people who are negative and dealing with them swiftly, and maybe getting them some help? And if they cannot be developed, then taking action, and also really putting a lot of effort into the folks who may also have fear, but they know how to have a growth mindset and really lean into it. So if you can talk about the two sides of that sword, and the importance and also the consequences of each.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and just to hit the hammer on the head for you, when we launched our revenue kickoff and our kind of plan for the year for 21, we talked about the importance of strategic account management and world-class customer service and what have you. And we talked about growth mindset, because we are about to do hard things. And when you're about to do hard things, you have to be in the right position to do it. And we are making commitments to how we're going to invest in our team as well. But you have to have everybody on the bus and willing, and everyone needs to get the vision and be on board. And to address, the second part of your question, when you don't have everyone on board, especially if they're high performer, bad actor, I've seen that pretty much everywhere I've been. It's not unique to any one company, but it is such a business risk to maintain those people, because often what I also see is this high performer, bad actor combo has almost like convinced the leadership of the company that they will be lost without them, and that they won't hit their revenue goals, and it'll be terrible. And so we must tolerate this. The reality is, pretty much I can guarantee you, 80% of the entire company is talking about this on Slack or over text or whatever, and they're upset about it and they can't believe it's tolerated and it makes them question leadership, frankly, that's a business risk. So your morale is going down. People don't want to stay in companies that tolerate high-performing bad actors. It's just the truth. And so I think it's a tremendous business risk. And by the way, I also will say every time I've seen companies make the hard decision to part ways with folks like of this nature, it's always been a huge relief, almost like a pressure valve has been released and everything has gotten much better in the future. So I know it's hard, but especially if you're, like I said earlier, if you're about to set your company up to do some hard things and tackle some big challenges, and I'm feeling inspired by some of the things you were saying earlier about being a coach of high performance athletic teams, like everyone needs to be on the same page and willing to work the same level. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. So you have to make the tough decisions, and then you have to make the ask explicit. Like I said earlier, we talk almost every town hall, every leadership meeting we have, we talk about growth mindset. We give examples of having a growth mindset. We figure out ways to invest in our teams to have one, to support them in having one. So they're willing to do it. We're willing to support them.
And so what are the consequences if someone's not on board, especially if they're in a position to kind of, and I was going to say, and the only way that I usually explain this, and forgive the analogy, but what if there's someone in a position that is an emotional contagion that kind of infects the downline? What is, especially if there's big initiatives coming up, what can some of the consequences of that be?
Well, I mean, it's a poisoning of the well, right? If you see your leader not believing, you're not going to believe either, right? So it's so critical that you are aware of how your leaders are positioning things to their teams and how people are feeling, because again, it's a business risk. You will lose revenue. You will see churn. A classic example is if you have people that are not excited about the product you're selling, talking to customers, and the customer can feel that energy, right? It's like, not everyone is a great actor. If the person doesn't believe, we can tell. That's going to make your customer lose confidence in your product and your company. That's going to make churn happen. That's going to impact your revenue goals. So I cannot stress enough, this is more than just culture, right? This is actual revenue risk that you are allowing to happen when you don't need to let it happen.
And so then the next question is, what's the best way to have it happen? Because you were saying, a lot of times some of these, people could be amazing. They could be amazing at what they do. They just happen to also be this other thing. Mm-hmm. And so what's the best way to approach it and make it better? Or the stages of approaching it and dealing with it?
I mean, I think depending on the seniority of the person, but because look, everyone does deserve a second chance and everyone does deserve the chance to turn things around. I truly believe that as well. But I think this is kind of a funny way to say this, but what I was coached by my coach to how to think about this was, we need to evaluate if this person is coachable. And if they're coachable, then it's probably worth the investment. Because I don't know what your experience is, but maybe 30 or 40% of the time, a coachable person you can turn around. It's not 100%, but an uncoachable person you can turn around exactly 0% of the time. And the way I've been taught to really discern if someone is coachable or not is when you do the feedback. I mean, oftentimes what we've done at Demandbase or previous lives is initiate a 360 review. Which if you've never done one before is one of the scariest things to go through, but also the most enlightening and the most powerful and empowering things you can do. And if you haven't done one, I would encourage you to ask for one, but you do a 360 and then you give the feedback to this person, and the way they react to it is the most important thing, because the uncoachable person is focused on trying to identify who said what in the 360 and discredit them or talk about why that's not fair or it's not true. The coachable person will be self-aware, recognize how someone might interpret their behavior in a certain way, and want to have an open conversation about how to not be perceived in that way. Uncoachable, I don't care that I'm perceived in this way. It's all their fault. Coachable, I don't want to be perceived in this way. Can you help me not be perceived in this way? And then you really have to make that decision pretty quickly. But if you kind of use that rule of thumb, you can figure it out pretty quickly.
And so then figure it out, and then what?
If they are not coachable, then you have to have an exit conversation. And sometimes it's okay to part ways. I think people focus a lot, especially here in the Bay Area and the high tech world, about really wanting to create these perfect cultures that no one wants to leave. And we really don't like it when people leave. You know, it's almost like a personal affront to us when someone leaves, but sometimes it's okay when people leave, you know, like bad relationships end for good reasons in all aspects of life. And in certain cases, people have just taken it as far as they can take it. And it's okay to acknowledge that our time together might have come to an end. And you can do that in a loving, professional way. It doesn't have to be this aggressive, you know, you're fired moment. It can be like, it just really feels like we're not on the same page anymore, you know, and I'm not sure you can be happy here. I'm not sure we can be successful together with how you're approaching things. And frankly, 9 times out of 10, I bet you if you have that conversation, they will agree with you.
Mm-hmm. And then,
maybe 9 times, maybe 7 times out of 10.
Yeah. And of course, this might be the most difficult question or reflection on this topic, but why aren't people doing this, and why aren't they doing it swifter?
So fear is probably the biggest one. I do believe, in my experience, seeing this, it's often this kind of, again, we'll call them high performing bad actor, has very much got the upper echelons of senior leadership convinced that they are essential and that they are not replaceable, right? And so there's a classic expression about, I think it's about training, or, you know, what if we invest all this money in people and they leave? And it's like, but what if we don't and they stay? You know, it's like, you have to think about it from both sides of the coin. And I think it's really the fear of what's going to happen if that person leaves because they're so irreplaceable, when in fact, that's almost never true, you know? So I think it's a combination of that. Status quo can be easier. Sometimes a warm body is better than nobody, you know, like if there's not anyone else to do the thing that this person's doing. But I really do believe that, and frankly, the other thing that I will say is another high characteristic of folks like this, in my experience with multiple companies, is they are very good at managing up to the decision makers about if those people stay or not. So the people that are typically most miserable or having the biggest impact negatively from bad actor high performers are people junior to them or peers or what have you, because they manage up very well. So a lot of times the senior leadership may be aware that this person is an issue, but certainly not to the extent that they truly are, because their experience will almost never be that of what other people's experience is. So it can be a combination of fear and unawareness of the true impact of what's going on.
Yeah. And what has now, it seems like from, you know, when we were talking before we went live, that, you know, Demandbase has really taken this head on to make, you know, with the growth mindset. And, you know, I assume it's based on, you know, Carol Dweck's work, but just understanding that we have a tough road ahead and we're not going to candy coat it, or, you know, there's just no way around it. But this is the mindset that we need you to have. These are the tools that we're going to give you. We know it's scary. We know it's big. It might even be something, you know, venturing into the unknown. We are asking you to not just put your toe in, but exist outside your comfort zone. And this is how you manage it. So do you feel is the importance of that? And how has Demandbase gone about, you know, doing that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a classic story to tell is how we did it wrong out of the gate. I think we initially, you know, we launched a new product. We were doing a lot of things all at once. And I think we really wanted to focus on how optimistic we were and excited we were about the future. And we got feedback that was really fair from the field that was like, I feel like either you don't know what's really going on, you don't appreciate how hard this is for us, or you're sugarcoating this, right? And it didn't feel authentic the way we were cheerleading. We were kind of taking a cheerleader only approach in the beginning. Got some really good feedback. And, you know, it was actually I was talking at a town hall once, and I just started really calling out teams that were overwhelmed and that we're going through a harsh learning curve. I started trying to give context of what experiences were like for, we have our customer success team that is trying to learn the new platform, but still supporting clients in the old platform. And some of you get to live only in the new platform. And, I'm like, think about that, how hard that would be. Like, it's hard, and it's going to be hard for a couple of months. And so and then I cannot tell you the change in just people really appreciated the transparency and the real talk. And so I think, to your point, stressing that these big, exciting things we're doing are not going to be easy, and stressing that, like hard things, not everyone does hard things because they're hard, right? And so, you need to be, but acknowledging and having empathy for people that are doing a lot of the work that you yourself might not be doing as a senior leader goes an incredibly long way. That transparency and that authenticity is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so is there something that you can, leave everyone with? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we're not obviously all chief revenue officers, but in a sense, most of us are all salespeople in a sense, and that we are selling products, we are selling services, and maybe even, we have to sell ideas even to our family or what have you. But in the context of business, can you leave us with some gems of wisdom as we kind of head into mile 27 of this marathon that we're in, year 2 of the pandemic, and especially for sales when there's so much uncertainty? So what gems of wisdom can you share with us? So if we have this conversation again, the end of December, you're like, that really helped. This year really ended up better than I thought possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think my answer might be, well, maybe not surprising to you, but there's something around the concept of balance that's really important to me, but also diversity of how you're spending your time. And I think, which are kind of the same, but also not like the latter. I also put into like the growth mindset category. Like, if you can, try to take an hour a week to try to learn something new, right? Like, I don't know. I started taking tennis lessons once a week. I'd never really learned how to play tennis. And it's very humbling to be coached, and it's humbling to be so bad at something and watch like 12-year-olds being like so good. And you're just like, oh my God. But I do think, people are probably working too hard and too consistently throughout the day, and not like, the reality is we've all said 9 to 5 is dead. If 9 to 5 is dead, stop being glued to your computer from 9 to 5. Take breaks, go for a walk, do something else. Like, you have to take control of avoiding your own burnout. And I do think like people are afraid to do that, because I do think there's a lot of people that are probably scared in the work from home environment that they will not be understood to be working as hard as everybody else. Like, what replaces FaceTime at the office to prove that you're working hard, And so I think we as leaders need to signal as much as we can that we are doing those things. I mentioned to you earlier, I made a point to make my calendar public so everyone in the company can see exactly what's on my calendar. And there's blocks on there when I'm saying I'm trying to exercise, or if I'm doing something with my kids. I'm not trying to hide any of that. I'm kind of trying to normalize that this is life now. But I really think like if you don't embrace that, the burnout's going to be it's going to come at you very, very hard and fast.
Mm-hmm. Especially if it's layered on top of big initiatives, new initiatives, in that type of thing. And one thing that I'll share too along that lines, and I agree, on the topic of high performance, which is the hat that I wear, and that I take it sustainable high performance so seriously. But what I have found is some people, it's not even 9 to 5, it's like 7 to 7.
Yeah.
Like I would say 9 to 5 is dead because people are working longer. And a lot of times, for example, if they're working and maybe they have another spouse working, or maybe one spouse is staying home and taking care of the kids, they feel like they have to flip from work to other responsibilities without being able to figure out the puzzle of self-care. In other words, raising the necessity of self-care and having the communications with people in their family or in their company to where can I fit in that 10-minute walk, that half an hour workout, that, making meetings, 45 minutes rather than 60 minutes. So there's a buffer, and really, there's very smart people that are doing amazing things, at least what I've seen, and they don't understand actually how to be sustainable high performers. They're high performers, but they're not sustainable high performers. So I see this as really an, epidemic, and something that I'm working really hard on. And I really want to honor you for making your calendar public and letting people see that you might take time at 3 o'clock when kids are done with school to, get them somewhere, your workouts blocked in your calendar, because, at the end of the day, people are, product launches are not, it's not a finish line.
No,
it's a process. It's part of the process. And like you said, I think that this lack of self-care and lack of, sometimes employees get a day off, they honestly don't know what to do with themselves. And so they need some, some guidance. And because I think, you mentioned churn, like it's really expensive, and burnout contributes to this churn, not just the emotional contagion of, some other people that might need to be managed or educated or dealt with, but also this rapidly approaching burnout. It's unfortunate for individuals, but it's costly for companies.
It is. And I wonder sometimes, and you and I were kind of talking about this earlier, if the term wellness was like, it was such a, to my understanding, wellness was like an attempt to replace weight loss. This is not about weight, this is about wellness, but wellness sounds a little bit indulgent to people. And it doesn't sound like something you must do. And I really appreciate you talking about high performance, because that is a much more, I don't know, it just feels less indulgence to talk about how do you need to kind of fuel your high performing self, because you can't, even the best athletes can't run a marathon every single day, right? They need days of rest. They need days of massage or whatever it might be for them to invest in their long-term sustainable high performance. So I really appreciate those concepts.
Yeah, no, of course. And if you look at, I have to bring up a tennis analogy. I have 2 Division I tennis players in my family. So we live close together. If you need a tennis lesson, I can set you up. But what I was going to say is, if you look at Roger Federer, he's slowing down a little bit now at 40 something with 4 kids, but he had a 20+ year run, and he was the only one that did not play for a couple months. He didn't play on the sand at all. He kind of bypassed that whole season, whereas most tennis players might have had a week off, but he took 3 months off, and lo and behold, he's had one of the longest and most successful seasons of any tennis player here recently. So I really do believe that we've had a lot of talks about sport being a microcosm of society. I really do think that that is the case, and sustainable high performance is going to require some shifts. And I think how things used to be in the past, they might have been okay going as is, because people would get to travel, and maybe they had a little break from their family. Maybe they had a commute where they could listen, do their meditation on the train or read, or just kind of, and now that's not there. And I really think that we're on a slippery slope right now. And I really want to honor all the, the awareness and all the work that Demandbase is doing as far as, the expectations and, putting in the work for the personal development with everyone. And I think it'll pay off in spades in the long run.
I agree. That's the plan.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for your time. There have been so many points of wisdom here. I can't wait to share them. And sit tight. We'll have a conversation offline, but I'm cheering you on. I can't wait to, keep following you at Demandbase and keep up all of your amazing work.
Thank you.